and we have to pay dearly for environmental friendly technologies. So in this context, it's easy to understand why Doha Round has failed. Challenge number 4, fighting poverty. In today's world, we all know roughly 800 million people suffer from hunger, perhaps 100 million more because of the food price rise. And nearly 1 billion people earn less than $1 a day. 2 billion people less than $2 a day. This is a reality. Half of the world's population live in poverty. And the United Nations has a wonderful goal, UN Millennium Goal, of halving the poverty, extreme poverty, by half by the year 2015. Yet, most developing countries seem to have missed or will miss this target. It's a shame that in this world of abundance, enough food has been produced, but so many people suffer from abject poverty. If we use the United Nations statistics, actually, over the past 20 years, 70% of poverty alleviation took place in China. If without China's contribution, the picture would be dismal. So, how to approach this issue of fighting poverty? And I've been to 18 African countries. My own sense is that this whole approach based on so-called democracy building will not work. Yeah. I will come to this why so. Now, do we have some new ideas to fight these challenges? I will submit some of these ideas as a way to provoke discussions here. First, I think that good governance should be considered as more important than building liberal democracies in many, many developing countries. The current approach to global issues, such as fighting poverty, is largely based in the Western idea of liberal democracy. And this approach may not be working that well, because it has been conceived with little regard to local conditions. It treats sub-Saharan Africa and other less developed countries as mature societies in which Western institutions will automatically take root. It imposes democratization before a culture of political tolerance and rule of law is established. And the end result has been discouraging and even devastating. We can find many examples from Haiti to Iraq to Kenya to Mongolia, to a less degree perhaps also Georgia. And I share one argument made by Supuchai of UNCTAD, Secretary General UNCTAD. And he said the reason behind this food crisis in recent months is the fact that billions spent on political reforms, millions spent on food production. And for many developing countries, from my observation, it's far more important to establish and to have a functioning government. I describe this as a kind of good government, which means it can deliver basic services such as food, security, hospital services, public transport, basic law and order. Without this, liberal democracy is a pipe dream. And the second idea on my part is I think there is a strong need within the Western countries, within the Western societies, to reform its democracy, its democratic institutions. Because this whole idea of democracy in the West is based on this idea of government held responsible, accountable to the people of that country. There are a lot of advantages, but there are also problems. In the age of globalization, we need to look at issues beyond our national borders. If it's only domestic accountability, it not be that effective to fight global issues, to find solutions for global issues. For instance, one major problem is excessive short-term considerations, excessively narrow perspectives. But the age of globalization, we need long-term considerations. We need broader perspectives. For instance, how can you convince, say, the American public to have a, say, carbon tax for the sake of environment protection and without losing votes? These are type of challenges we are faced with. Third, fighting poverty itself should be considered and established as a human right. At this moment, the United States does not regard fighting poverty as a human right. Europe is still debating whether this should be considered as a human right. But in the case of China, fighting poverty is number one human right, is a core human right. So China has achieved, has done very well in fighting abject poverty. And in European countries, in the West, human rights is treated more like legal issue. But in many developing countries, there are no strong legal institutions or tradition of rule of law. It will take a long time to establish all this. So from the Chinese experience, it's better to regard these issues, human rights, regard fighting poverty, as a political task and political issue. So at all levels of government, there must be priority given to fighting poverty. I think the world international community can draw inspirations from China's experience. And the fourth point is also an idea, which is perhaps more provocative because we have so many lecturers who talk about EU experience, value-based diplomacy, etc. But I think perhaps we should also add another element or dimension. That is, perhaps the West should also be a bit more self-critical. Because there is an impression, it's sometimes deep in belief, that the West offers solutions to issues worldwide. But in fact, if you look at closely, many issues in the world, actually the West is also a source, sometimes the source of many problems in the world today, including issues I mentioned, the agricultural subsidy in Europe, Africa's agricultural problem, climate fighting, global warming, etc., and disarmament. There are many, many problems which can trace the roots and cause to the practice in the West. So this is also a challenge. It requires the West to reflect on their own responsibility more clearly in order to solve many of the world's problems. And also, in this light, we have to reflect on to what extent the international institutions should be reformed. And for instance, will the G8 still be of that much relevance when all the issues they are discussing cannot be resolved without cooperation from countries like China, India, or Brazil? Again, this is a question for discussion. In summary, I think global governance requires full cooperation and coordination between the rich countries and poor countries, between the West and all other developing nations. It requires new thinking, new ideas. It requires soul-searching, even a paradigm shift. And many in the West think that with the removal of the Berlin Wall, all the problems in the world will be resolved through liberal democracy. And this turned out to be a false idea and hope. We have many other wars to be removed. The wars between rich and poor, the wars between civilizations, the wars between polluters and their victims. Most of the victims are developing nations, etc. So we have to really use our brain and think along the lines of new ideas and be more creative in order to contribute our bit to better global governance. That's all for my presentation. Thank you for your attention.